Hello, everyone. Jonily and Julie here, bringing you a spectacular series on money and math sense. Sense, C-E-N-T-S. Yes, it means sense, S-E-N-S-E. But since we're talking about money and mathematics, it's very fitting to spell sense, C-E-N-T-S. So I'm super excited to bring to you today the second episode of this series. And Julie, I had a thought right before we came on today, and that was the last episode, episode 1, was targeted toward instruction for littles, 5 years old, 6 years old, even preschool, 3 years old and 4 years old. So this is episode 2, but I'm almost thinking we might need to go back and do an episode 1.5, because I have some extra little nuggets for those youngins. But today we are going to focus on grade 2. We are in the States, and so grade 2, maybe pushing it a little bit to grade 3, but age levels are 7, 8, 9-year-olds. And we're going to talk about how we can incorporate money in math classrooms, but also apply to financial literacy with our young people. I am a math teacher. I am an educator. I am an instructional coach who coaches teachers on enhancing instructional delivery in their classroom. I work with grade levels preschool through high school. And even higher ed. Julie is our financial expert. Julie, do you want to say a few things about what you do?
Yes, as you said, I'm a financial expert. I am a Ramsey certified coach. So for those of you who know who Dave Ramsey is, I am part of his program as well. I love talking about money and helping people to learn how to handle their money well. And I'm so incredibly excited about this opportunity that Jonily and I have here to be able to really lay some great foundation money-wise for children. I think in doing that, as the children get older, they'll have a strong, firm foundation to build on as far as understanding money and the importance of how we use it and ways to be able to bless others besides just for ourselves. So I'm very excited about all of this.
I love it. I love it. And Julie, I know you love talking about finances, and your primary audience is typically adults, yes. Young adults, older adults. And I am so excited that you have agreed to collaborate with me to talk about how to build that foundation with young people, with 6, 7, 8-year-olds. We're going to talk about the teenage years in some of our later episodes. And then finally, how what we're doing in schools, specifically in math classrooms, can help build this financial understanding, money management, budgets. And we can teach our math standards at each grade level through this vehicle and lens of building financial literacy along the way. It can be embedded and connected throughout. It doesn't need to be a separate set of lesson plans. I'm going to bring to you the educational side. Julie's going to bring the financial side. And as we bring to you more and more episodes, it's going to bring us to Julie's primary experience, which is helping adults with their finances and money management so that they can succeed in life, not just financially, but just as a successful human, a successful citizen, based on good financial decisions. So here we go, kicking off episode 2. And I want to remind us about episode 1. And Julie, you actually, I'm going to have you start the teaching points early here. You actually, in episode 1, talked about 3 buckets. And I love this. Your 3 buckets were give, save, and spend. Yes. So if you can remind us, why those 3 buckets, what do those 3 buckets mean? And is there a specific order or priority of order? Kind of lay that groundwork for us.
Yes. Yes, so actually, as far as priority of order, what you just mentioned is really exactly it. So when we have money come in, our first priority is to give. So typically what that is 10% of your income of what came in, you're going to give. You can give that to charity. You can give that if you go to church, you can give that through your giving at church. So there's any number of ways to do that. And one of the things that Jonily and I were talking about is Dave Ramsey has this comment that he makes about that. And he talks about how God's a giver. And when we give, we become more like him. And whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, when we give, we become better people just across the board, because we understand that money is more about me and what I can have, but the blessing that we gain by giving to others in need, others we love, whatever, is a huge thing. So the first priority is to give, typically 10% of what came in. And then the next thing is to save. So again, you can save 10% of what comes in. So see, we're doing percentage stuff here, right?
I'm picking up on this.
Right. So, and again, it's important to have savings. You know, sometimes life is going along great and all of a sudden something happens and you need some extra money. And if you don't have anything in savings, then you're trying to figure out what to do. Oftentimes what we do is we borrow money and then dig ourselves in a hole. So you want to make sure that you're setting aside 10% into a savings account for any emergencies that come up or anything that you've decided, this is really important to me. Okay. And then the third one is to spend. So you have 80% of what came in that you can spend. And, that should be plenty. The importance is making a plan for that 80% so that okay, I have these things that are coming up. I have a birthday that's coming up and I need to buy a gift. I have a friend invited me to go to do something with them and I need to pay for my part of it, right? That's something that you can pull from savings if you don't have it available to you otherwise. So those kinds of things, just to remember that those three things are really the priorities that you need to set.
I love this. So a few things that have come to mind that are going to connect to my teaching, which is for teachers in schools or homeschools, or anyone who has any kind of influence on young people in school. Mm-hmm. When we think about I'm going to pull two things from what you said. One is the idea of percentages. So I'm going to make that connection in a moment. Okay. And the other that I thought of is when you were talking about spending, there are certain fixed expenses that I have, as an adult, for kiddos, that's a little bit more difficult to understand, but I have certain fixed expenses that we have that no matter what, this is what goes out every week or every month or however we set up those expenses. And, I think of those as kind of needs. I have to pay for my house or my car if I have a car payment, my electric. There are certain things that we pay for that are dictated to us if we choose to have those things, but they're necessities in most cases.
Right.
And then we have these other expenditures that are maybe wants, things that we want to buy. And then I kind of think there's like this middle category. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud right now, this middle category of, you mentioned a birthday celebration,
right?
And so there are certain things that are going to come up, maybe it's not a need or a want, maybe it's this third bucket. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is we have to think in terms of wholes and parts. Mm-hmm. Mathematically speaking.
Right.
So I'm gonna do some mathematics teaching, but any thoughts on sort of my response to your financial process?
Yes, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about the importance of, and this is something that we've talked about before, is the importance of what's often called a budget. Okay, and I know for a lot of people, a budget sounds like a bad word because somehow we've managed to feel like it's just an awful thing to have to do. But instead of having to do it, how about let's make a money plan? You know, we all, like you said, we all have fixed expenses. So we know that those are the first things that we need to plan for. And then beyond that, we can prioritize, you know, what's important to us. But it's really important to have it down on paper. So however you want to do that, you want something that you're going to see. Now, yes, you can do an app if you will be intentional to go back to that app and, you know, make sure that you're not overspending in categories that will then keep you from being able to pay maybe your electric bill, Jonily, like you were just talking about, some of those kinds of things. So again, just being intentional, putting it on paper, it's yours to do it every single month. So when money comes in, make sure that you categorize that money so that you don't lose track of it. And then if something comes up and you need to shift money from one category to another, yeah, absolutely, it's yours. You can kind of move things around, but really being intentional is the biggest thing.
I love it. I love it. Ignore the office phone. I didn't take it out of the room before we did this, and we're not going to cut that out. We're just going to keep on going here. That is exceptional. And if you are a parent of a young one, you might be thinking, okay, this may not be completely relevant to them, but my gosh, this is really relevant to me. Like, this is good advice. And as we continue our episodes of this series, we are going to focus on the teenage, the young adult, and the adult lifestyle and give you some really great financial tips. But before we get there, if you are a parent, I want you to think about, how do we educate our kiddos? And today's age range is 7-8 years old. How do we educate our kiddos without being completely irrelevant? What are some things that we can do now to help instill some of this for later? Number one, just having conversations. So using this as a learning tool and having these conversations about the types of things that we spend and the types of money that comes in. Now, we don't have to be completely candid with our young ones. Now, teachers, this is my teaching today. So if you are an educator, specifically a math teacher of ages 7, 8, 9 years old, there are specific math standards that we need to teach. Now, Julie mentioned percents. So I'm going to come back to that idea of percents. We are not teaching percents. That's not in the standards for ages 7, 8, 9. But here is where we fall short mathematically, because in order to understand budget and finances, we have to understand fraction and percent. And if you talk to any secondary math teacher or any secondary math student, meaning like those teenage years, one of the biggest struggles in understanding mathematics at that level is just understanding number, percents and fraction. And so we can remedy two things. We can remedy poor financial decisions, and we can remedy this lack of understanding of fraction and percents at the same time. That's the teaching I want to do today to connect it to what Julie said. So even though my standards for 7 and 8 year olds don't say that I'm teaching them percents, what does percent look like? And what does money look like at that level? So let's get to it. In our last session, we looked at the tens frame, and I have this right here behind us. So if you are an elementary teacher, you probably know what a tens frame is. If you don't, it's right here. It's just a piece of paper with 10 parts. Because if we want students to understand money, and especially in the monetary system we have here in the States, when we're talking about dollars, kids have to understand tens and hundreds, because that's our base 10 system. So the foundational piece at this age level is to understand 10 and what makes 10. Now, what I can start to do is I can start to have conversation about what 10% means. I'm not going to give a quiz or a test on this to 7 and 8-year-olds. I'm not going to have them put this on paper. I'm not going to have them work out percentage problems. But it's essential mathematically later to understand what percents are in the connection to tens frames. So if I look at this tens frame, I've got 4 spots that are full out of the 10 spots that are available. And I know that 4 and 6 makes 10. This is essential later because 40% and 60% makes that 100%, makes that one whole 10 frame. These concepts are essential for these kiddos. They're essential for later mathematical understanding, and they're essential for later understanding of money and budget. Julie, you also mentioned this idea of 10%. So I can have conversations with kids that if I have all of this full of 10 pennies, 10% of that would be one of these pennies. They don't have to understand why. I could just have that conversation. What students can understand at this level is 50%, is half. They have a really good understanding innately of this. And so I can relate it to 50% and half. This is building such a phenomenal foundation for mathematical understanding later. But notice the markers on my tens frame are pennies. So in elementary school, many times we use markers that aren't coins, but I highly recommend that if you're using manipulatives, use coins and use the value of the coin that matches the value of the number you're trying to express. So the last time we talked about this in episode 1, and that's a connection and a little extension to, okay, 10% would be one of these pennies, 50% would be half of this. It would be 5 of those pennies out of the 10. So we can just have conversations, even if they're not specifically in our standards. But in our standards at this age level is starting to develop the understanding of halves, fourths, and thirds. I can mention percentages, don't want to make a big deal of it, but I definitely don't want to wait until students are 10 or 11 years old when the standards say to start talking about percentages. So Julie, you know as well as I do that when you're talking with adults about their financial budgets, or I love the phrase that you used, the money plan, you've got to have a good understanding of fraction and percent. Yeah. Now, how do we go from a tens frame to what I think is probably the best mathematical lesson with 7 and 8-year-olds? And that is, I'm going to show you this here, what I call a dollar chart. So how do we go from 10 to 100? So teachers, listen up. This is for you. This is building mathematical fluency and financial fluency at the same time. So last time we looked at the tens frame, we had this tens frame. We cut it apart into 2 fives frames. We put this side by side to make a number line, a long tens frame, a tens bar. And this is actually the top row of what I like to use, which is a 100 chart. Now, a 100 chart is exactly what I showed you here. It's 10 rows of 10 strips. So it's the tens frame cut apart, made into a long 10 stick, and then 10 of those creates this 100 chart. 100 numbers fit in the 120 chart. Now, the reason I call this a dollar chart, especially for our 7 and 8-year-olds, students very often do not equate the number 4 with a value of 4 cents or $4. And I want them to see 4 in lots of different representations. In order for us to understand the value of money, we have to understand the value of number. My math teachers out there, you know as well as anyone that a strong number sense dictates a high success rate in mathematics. So my big goal here is to increase students' sense of numbers, S-E-N-S-E, of numbers and CENTS of numbers. So the reason I call this a dollar chart is when I have these 100 boxes built from this tens frame, and kids can see the connection between the two models, I have a spot for each of the numbers 1 through 100. And even in making change, it's important to understand that if I have to pay 34 cents and I give $1, how many cents do I get back in return? That can all start with 7 and 8-year-olds. We're building financial literacy, but we're teaching our math standards at the same time. Now I'm going to show you another dollar chart that I filled in some things that I think are essential for ages 7 and 8, even though this isn't explicitly a part of our standards until maybe ages 9, 10, 11. But notice in my dollar chart, instead of putting the numbers 1, 2, 3, I'm writing the number, the value of pennies, 1 penny, 2 pennies, 3 pennies, in terms of dollars. So when I write the value of pennies in terms of dollars, I have to use decimal numbers. Now, I also, on hundreds chart, use whole numbers very frequently. So I'm going to show you another hundreds chart. You know, I use whole numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. This is actually a 120 chart. I like to go beyond 100 so we can see how the numbers develop after 100. But I also like to, in small doses with these young kiddos, show them what these numbers look like. 99 cents, $1. I could put 1.00, so that they can start to see money notation, just like it did on the tens frame, where I'm using pennies to show that the value of a penny is 1. So to fill up 10 spots, I would need 10 pennies. As a matter of fact, at this age level, for this episode, I could trade out these 10 pennies for a dime or 2 nickels. One row, a half of a dime, is 1 nickel. I want to use this language in math classrooms for these 7 and 8-year-old kiddos. This seems like kind of a big disconnect between what Julie is teaching us and how we can help students benefit from financial literacy at this level, at the grade 1, 2, 3 level in school. But this is the foundation. This is the exact connection, the exact language, the exact experiences that we need to generate for these students in these classrooms in schools. So Julie, having heard that, like the mathematical perspective of it, and just, you know, conceptualizing this idea of fraction and percent and decimal and the notation, do you have any other thoughts to add? I mean, I know you're not an educator, which is, this is the beauty of this collaboration, because we want to connect real world things that matter. Nothing matters more than money. I mean, I hate to even say that, because, you know, the money can be the root of all evil. You know, it's this catch-22, but if we don't understand money, then we're going to have successes or failures based on it. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Any thoughts based on what I just delivered mathematically for our teachers in schools and the connection to your financial understandings?
Yeah, I really love what you've done here, and just the visual that you've shown, because I think that a lot of times we see this kind of thing and we don't connect money to the numbers. And so it's so important at this foundational point in the children's lives to begin to understand the value. So yes, it's a number, but there's value attached to that. And to understand, I mean, I don't know about you, but how, if you go into a like McDonald's or Burger King, right? And you go to order something and their register is down. How often have you been there and the person behind the counter does not know how to count out the change? So you give them $10 and it was $3.65, and they have no idea how to count out the change. And that's such an important thing, because money is such a foundational thing in our society. we need to understand that. We need to know that. So it's, yes, yes, it's important financially with your budget and that kind of thing, but it's a basic concept that all of us need to be able to understand in order to function well in this society.
And here's a question. Have we lost that skill, or did we never really have it? Yeah, I mean, let's leave that question rhetorical. So if you're watching this video, like, blow up the comments, because I think that there's a lot of opinions on this, and let's get fired up about it. It's a very interesting conversation. And all I know is I want to rejuvenate this skill and concept. The dollar chart, the 100 chart that I'm showing is that visual representation that we can start very early on with our youngest of kiddos to understand. I call it pairs to 100. So if it's a 36 cents, what number matches with that to make the 100 or make the $1? And just knowing, we talk about math facts in school, and we want students to have automaticity and fluency. We want kids to like just know math facts, but typically we define math facts as like single digit multiplication. 3 times 4 is 12. We want kids, but some other math facts that we often forget about are pairs of numbers that make 10, 5 and 5, 4 and 6, 7 and 3. But pairs of numbers that make 100, 50 and 50, 40 and 60, 85 and 15. We want students to be very fluent and automatically just know those things. Now, we could have them memorize, but for many of our students, that's their biggest weakness and downfall. So if I had a different strategy to get them to be fluent and just know without memorizing, I would absolutely do as a teacher. And the strategy is right here in front of you. It's using the 100 chart and the dollar chart and engaging students in experiences where they can physically see that visual and use manipulatives to create a sense of value, which is going to improve their number sense, strengthen their number sense. Now, Julie, we talked the last time, and then between these sessions, when you and I were reflecting on our last episode, and that is, we've said it already, but laying a strong foundation. And you talked about the people that you coach. So you actually coach adults, I think primarily adults, the people that you coach, and you made a comment, if we would have had these mathematical experiences in school. Could you talk a little bit about the people that you coach, kind of what that looks like, and then what revelation you had as we've been learning together on, gosh, if we would have had some of these experiences in school. So if you could kind of teach on that for a moment, and then what I'll do is I'll kind of conclude this episode 2 and give you a little teaser for what episode 3 is going to look like.
Yeah, so as far as the adults go, again, for those of us who are older, the mathematics teaching was not anything like what you're teaching now. Okay. And for most of us, that connection, I think, just didn't happen somewhere along the line. And then when you come into the money side of it, it's like understanding the value of money was not a concept that was ever really talked about. So, I mean, growing up for me, I never really understood the value. Now, some of that for me is because at some point in time, as children receiving money for Christmas and for birthdays, and unfortunately, although it didn't seem like it at the time, unfortunately, the first question that was always asked of us was, what are you going to spend it on? Okay, well, when you
only one bucket.
Yes, exactly. And when you don't understand the numbers portion of money, and you're asked a question, what are you going to spend it on? It creates this mindset that you really have to work hard at to change, to really understand the value of money and how can we use that in a positive way and not just blow through the money, right? So,
absolutely. Absolutely. And in your experience in coaching the adults that you coach, in your experience, what is their mathematical knowledge and their sense of numbers?
Yeah, that is not neither the knowledge or their number sense typically are really even there. You know, it's again because I love the way you're handling math these days because the way that we were taught when we were growing up was so incredibly different, and it wasn't based on not only understanding the math concept, but understanding how does that concept translate into real life, into reality, and into the things that we're going to need to know and understand as we get older. And so that is really this what we're doing here. I'm so passionate about it for that very reason, because what you're wanting to accomplish here will then bring us to our next generations being literate in money, in math, and in money, and able to really make some wise decisions rather than, oh yeah, math was a class I had to do, right? And and that's about it. Well, this is such an incredible opportunity to really help the children grow to be strong financially.
I absolutely love it. And a great way to have some of these conversations to build good habits
Yes.
and not create bad money habits based on my lack of understanding of mathematics and number. Now, you mentioned this different way of teaching math. I want to bring this up. This is a little irrelevant, but we throw around these phrases, old math, new math. Honestly, new math isn't new at all. It's been around since the 50s. So, there's kind of this misunderstanding of what new math is, but then there's this common core math. There's been a lot of hubbub with mathematics, but if we look at the financial success of the majority of adults just in the States, how does that equate to our mathematical foundation? I don't know. I'm just throwing just crazy questions out there. But I also want to bring the relevance of this like new math, old math, common core math battle and polarization. So we're not teaching any of that in this conversation. What we're teaching is smart math. Now I'm gonna give you a little sort of appetizer for what smart math is, and that's not really the goal of these sessions together, but smart math is really the math of the future. I mean, mathematical experiences that I know that I want our students to have today have not yet existed. Like, that's mind-blowing to think about. Like, what can we accomplish if we don't even know what the potential is of accomplishment? Like, I'm getting really crazy now. But I want to throw out this term smart math because in my work and at Minds on Math, we categorize what we do and really kind of based on what we're talking here, what is the smart way of providing mathematics and financial literacy in schools? So we'll kind of unwrap that in this series a little bit. But for more information on smart math, you can go to mindsonmath.com, MINDSONMATH, mindsonmath.com. Scroll down to the subscribe, put your name and email, subscribe to find more out about smart math, especially if you are a math teacher. So that is the dominant audience but if you're a parent or you just want more information about what's happening with mathematics in schools, go to mindsonmath.com and subscribe. Get all the information you need about smart math and what that battle is between old math, new math, and common core math. So as we conclude this episode 2 of our Money and Math Sense series, I want to give you, first of all, Julie, thank you. My goodness. This is an amazing collaboration. And I hope that all of you that are watching have some takeaways from this. And if nothing else, is making you think about our interactions with money, with math, and with our young people, and how we can help them build a better more successful financial future by instilling some good mathematical foundation. So Julie, thank you for that. And episode 3, we're gonna move into 9-10-year-olds, and we're gonna take this idea of 10 to 100, like today, to 1,000, to here's a big question for episode 3: how much is a million? I mean, you kind of have these prompts all the time. If you had $1 million, what would you do? We can't even wrap our heads around probably what the number 1 million means. And so how do we even understand financially what $1 million looks like? I mean, there's such a span between, you talked about the money coming in and the expenses going out. Do I even know what is possible to achieve if I'm underestimating my own knowledge of number? And I am passionate too, Julie. I am passionate about our instructional delivery in schools and the experiences that we're providing kids. And for this series, it's specifically with math and money. So in our next episode, episode 3, we're going to talk about larger numbers. And then as we get beyond that, we have to talk about smaller numbers. And so that's where some of our fraction and percent knowledge comes in. So we're going to look at the whole range of numbers. Number sense is defined as understanding the magnitude of numbers. Magnitude means how large or small numbers are and where they're located on a number line. And that's a goal of mine, is to improve and strengthen the number sense of our kids in school. And Julie, I know your goal is to improve the financial understanding, the money management of our adults, so that they can experience freedom, fulfillment, and success in their adult lives. So for now, this is episode 2, Jonily and Julie bringing you our series on money and math sense. Bye, everybody.